Okay. Welcome to Unapologetically Black Unicorns, or welcome back if you've been here before. Today, I have a guest, and it's somebody that I'm just getting to know, but have been lurking. I've been lurking and following Vesper. So Vesper Moore is with me today. Vesper, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you, Karis, for inviting me on. And my name is Vesper Moore. I do a variety of things, I'd say, like out in the world, but I describe myself as a mental health and disability rights activist, at least more widely for the broader community. I do prefer the term mad activist, disability justice activist, but in terms of what I do in my day to day, I help build peer run organizations around the world and do a lot of operations based in the United States. An organization called the Kiva Centers. I oversee another organization doing fabulous work called Madness Network News, publishing and speaking to the voices of mad folk more widely, and not just the whitewashed mad folk we've come to know, but the black and brown mad folk, right? Largely that aren't often highlighted. So with that resurgence, with that work, I think mad liberation, which, I know we're going to be talking more about mad liberation, is really at the center of what I do.
Wow. And so maybe we should back up a little bit because sometimes we're using terminology that either people may not have heard before. I have a wide variety of listeners and/or they're defining it one way, but let's talk about how you would define sort of madness, mad liberate, like the whole nine yards. So when we use the word mad, what does that mean?
So this definition aligns very nicely with the definition of neuroqueerness, which I can talk about that too a little bit, and neurodiversity and being neurodivergent. But the idea of mad is meant to subvert and defy our ideas of what is societally accepted as convention, and simultaneously subvert and defy our ideas of sanity. What is sane, right? So mad can be used as a socio-political identity in that way, very similarly to queerness, very similarly to a variety of terms that communities reclaim.
Wow. I love this idea, yes, of reclaiming. So how did you get into that and how did you find folks and connect to folks, or were you already connected and you all kind of rose up? Like what is that all? Because you're also young.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a youngin.
Yeah, it's all good.
Oh, for me, I kind of wish I had discovered ideas of mad liberation, neurodiversity, many things. Actually, I don't even know how prevalent neurodiversity was as a term. Trying to think back to that history, yeah, I don't even think it was really coined yet. But I was institutionalized on and off for 4 years, and that experience was one really harmful, but also really eye-opening. I think what's so fascinating to me about psychiatric oppression and some of these experiences, and also horrifying, is the complexity of what is at play in psychiatric institutions, both from the staff, both from the people who are deemed patients, and how people who come back who are like, I'm going to help my people, I'm going to help work with them, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, end up policing their own communities and hurting their own communities in many different ways, and the trauma and the complexity of the trauma at play. I think my introduction was through peer support, and I continue to do peer support work because I do believe in it as Indigenous community work, as transformative work, because that's where peer support's roots really are. And I do think of it as a tool to decolonize the mental health and medical industrial complex, as well as a way of sustaining our movements, right? So,
Right. So, okay, we're about ready to get real deep here. So, and we already got deep. We're just gonna keep going here, because you talked about decolonizing the medical industrial complex.
yes.
Because I think this is somewhat, I'm gonna say it is a possibly newer concept in our space. I know when we were working here in California on our state peer legislation, One of the things that I wanted to make sure of is that we were not just addressing, for example, cultural competency, but also structural competency and structural barriers that
Mm.
impact people's whole health and well-being, which means it's going to impact your emotional well-being, et cetera. And the response to that was, no, no, we don't need that. We don't need structural competency. And I'm like, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to kind of like when we talk about decolonizing, first of all, again, we're going to break it down a little bit. What are we decolonizing? What's being decolonized?
Right. Yeah. So we are working away from the ideas that are the contingency of the value of our body and minds are one contingent on what we produce. And secondly, the fact that we weren't meant to work and live the way that we live, that nature, us being nature and living in nature, regardless of if you live in a city, a suburban area, many different areas, right? We are interacting with nature, and there's so much happening that's corrupted the nature in ourselves and the ways in which we live. And often the way that we address that is through a deficit model. And that deficit model often puts the onus and the blame back on the individual. It takes us away from collectivism, which is a feminist idea, which is an idea that is founded in indigenous rights when we talk about restorative justice and a lot of these ideas of restoration and working together. And
Mhm.
it puts it back on the individual as the responsibility to recovery, which is why I think we have a challenge sometimes with that idea of
Mm.
recovery as it relates to a lot of folks. But then I also think, people have the right to claim whether or not that term recovery is liberatory to them. I'm not here to police that further. But getting back to decolonization, it is deconstructing those ideas. And I think, indigenous folk like myself and many other folk, we use that term decolonize, and it's really meant for us. I mean, a lot of people use the term to kind of disarticulate, kind of destructure a lot of these things,
Mhm.
dismantle these systems and
Mhm.
ideas and rebuild. But decolonizing in a collective way is to really, like, when I use that term decolonizing, I mean, like, how is your relationship with nature and all of existence collectively, right? Like
Mhm.
are you actually effectively able to engage in that whole person way you're describing? I mean, when we talk about whole health, we're talking about holistic ideas, we're talking about public health. When we talk about a social model of disability, a social model of trauma, it's just an all-encompassing idea of how we are connected to the ecosystem of existence, right?
Mhm.
It's a lot to recognize that we are living and dying simultaneously, and that emotional distress can be a product of that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what do you all do in your respite? I opened a respite here in Los Angeles. I say I literally did not do it by myself. That would be an impossibility. But with and through a group of people and a peer-run organization, we opened one of the first. It was two at the time, peer-run respites. And of course, being contracted through a county agency. Now we're working for LA County, which means all these rules and regulations and trying to figure out how to help the county create a contract that would honor what we needed to do and the way that we need to do it. Sort of, no, we're not many clinicians. No, this is no, we're not going to be managing people's medication. We're not doing that. We're not going to ask them that they take it. We're not going to make them go to groups because it was kind of like how the county sort of envisioned day treatment programs. And they were taking sort of that envisioning of a day treatment program and writing the scope of work so that the peer respite looked like a day treatment program where you can spend the night. It's like, no, 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 no. Yeah. So how do, and then I'm going to ask how you all are funded, because I think that's another thing when we're trying to do things that are not compromised by the quote unquote system. It's really difficult because you have to find different kind of funding sometimes to do that.
All right, let's go. So, yeah, there's so much to that. So, first, I want to say, don't accept contract dollars that don't serve you.
Yeah.
I like to think about it in my own life, right? Like I'm not going to work on if a relationship is toxic or harmful, I'm not going to bring that in to myself or my community or in those spaces. And if a contract is written in a way that is reflective of policing, and when I talk about policing, I don't mean just law enforcement, I mean every type of policing, right? You don't have to take that into your organization. If you want to try to have, I mean, I've seen people attempt it, like I've certainly, are like, oh, well, maybe you can bring in clinical consultants, maybe you can do the work this way. And you always try to think about how that can be done. And that's certainly to say that, yes, it is possible to have clinical consultants and be a peer-run organization and do the work in a way that is with integrity, care, and connection. But at the same time, it's a careful consideration. So we started off with funding from the Executive Office of Health and Human Services through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That went to the Department of Mental Health, really supporting us with building the initiative, building the work. It was very collaborative from the beginning of like, although this contract that was proposed was for a clinical respite, it's being awarded to a peer-run organization. So
Mhm.
what are we willing to do, what really works in our space, in the ways in which we operate. And a big part of that was that we weren't going to refer to the people coming in as referrals, right? We were going
Mhm.
to say, someone can recommend that person and they can be recommended by anyone anywhere and they can recommend themselves. So that was an important structural piece first, was not
Mhm.
to police how the people come in. But there is, to a certain degree, how you can handle just in your capacity, your own personal being, and for the team, like how many people are coming in. So what we did was we had a recommendation form. That's really how we put together. And then people would be invited in just like they could be in any other space. And then we've really operated under the culture of people can check in to the respite and then they check out and they're guests, right?
Yeah.
And we fostered that culture in a house. We actually started in a hotel on the fifth floor of a
Mm.
hotel because we weren't sure if we were going to sustain the funding. And then we did, and then we got a house. So we're in a 6-room house, 3 bathrooms. It's actually a 3-floor house that we've worked very hard to make accessible in so many
Yeah.
different ways. And it's a beautiful environment. And then on top of that, we've also been doing mobile peer respite. And we've
Okay, whoa. Mobile
so
peer respite. But yeah, we're taking it back a second. What
yeah,
I
let's
have
take it.
not heard that. This is whoa. This is what is that? That's brand new
So
information.
So I don't know if mobile peer respite officially exists with the other 29 peer respites that exist in the United States.
Mhm.
I don't know if anyone in our international community is also like working the work of mobile peer respite. I'm sure people in peer support in some capacity are offering a degree of respite, but we formalized it in the way of we have mobile peer respite advocates, because we refer to them as peer respite advocates, the folks that work on our team, who go to folks' homes or meet them out in the community, whatever they'd prefer, and support them for 1 to 4 hours at a time, multiple times out of the week, anywhere in the Commonwealth. So that's
Wow.
anywhere
Okay.
largely.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so interesting. When we started our peer respite, I went around the country. Before we even started, I went around the country and started visiting some peer respites. And sorry, I did not make it to Massachusetts. I didn't make it that far north, east
That's a
and
lot
north.
to go all the way to Mass from.
Yeah, I got as far as upstate New York, so you know where I was. It's just because I have family in New York, so that was kind of an easy thing to go and do. The idea was if I'm in a state and I could find a peer respite, I wanted to go visit it and see it, get a feel for it, that sort of thing, and then come back and figure out how to advocate that we have this here in California, especially in LA. And so we had one in California already in the Northern Bay Area. And when we started thinking about what we wanted for ours and looking for housing, I'll never forget how annoyed people were with me because I'm like, No, that has steps. It's not accessible. Well, they can come through the back door if they're in a wheelchair. Like nobody comes through the back door.
No.
Everybody comes through the door they want to come through. And the front door generally is that door. But we're not sending people to another door because the entrance isn't accessible. And that,
Yeah.
the rooms had to be accessible as well and so forth. So we finally found a place. It was really great. And then working on more of those cultural aspects of the experience. We wanted people to have an experience. It wasn't about coming in because you needed a respite. What was that respite experience going to be like? And it had to be from the even before you even got to the place, right? So, like you're saying, instead of referrals, it was, I don't know that we use recommendations, but we did think of it kind of like, where do you go when you want a break? Like, what kind of places do
Mhm.
people go? And people kept saying, well, we go to hotels. So we built that into the experience that a person could have through the respite, from filling out a registration form, just like you would fill out a registration form at a hotel. You fill out your
Yeah.
little registration. You could pre-register. So you're, so you didn't have to go through and fill out all the information. We did not make people sit down and go through a long checklist of
Mm.
questions and things like that. And that was more about we will get to know people over time. We're not going to get to know them in a 10-minute sitting while they're really just wanting a cup of coffee or just to lay down or sit outside to fill
Like, why
out
would you
a
do that? Yeah.
an intake form, right?
Yeah. Legit.
So like we language, we experience, but this idea of a mobile respite is great. um I want to ask you too about advocacy work or activism work.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. One is, in your peer training, so your peer certification training, is there a piece in there about the role of advocacy, self-advocacy, system advocacy, or is that also one of the things that you all train on or have an expectation?
So like for the state training, we actually have three core principles, which are peer support, being a change agent, an agent of change, which encompasses advocacy. And then the other one is in but not of the system. So straight up, when you take it, everything that's built, all 30 something modules are built around those three core principles, just
Mm,
to start up. And then our code of ethics, we start with self-determination. And then like our code of ethic number 6 is like, we will not abide by or condone or facilitate any form of discrimination,
mm,
any form of discrimination at all. And you won't condone it, right? Which means you won't be
mhm,
present for it. Like it's
mhm.
a violation of your code of ethics to actually be present for it, right?
Wow.
I use that term violation, code of ethics, all of those things, but those are really the Commonwealth terms. Those are what often certification bodies use.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, we have a whole bunch of different trainings of a variety of things that we do. We center a lot of trainings around trauma. We train trauma informed peer support, our own adapted curriculum, not necessarily the one that has
Hmm.
come from SAMHSA, but although we did train with SAMHSA for a period of time. And we do peer trauma guide training, which is our own like intensive like continuation of that
Hmm.
certified peer specialist training that's focused around trauma, crisis in the moment, working in different environments, working in an emergency room environments, emergency services environments. We do a living with suicide training that's for both folks who have life experience with suicide themselves, but also more largely the caretakers of those folks, the family members. It's an
Mm,
individual approach. It's not necessarily a group approach, although we
mhm.
have a living with suicide group that we do. And on top of that, we have a variety of trainings. We do a psychiatric survivor history training as well, and
Oh
we have
wow.
modules on that also. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. And do you ever do those any of that virtually, or is that all? Here I am trying to sign up for one of your trainings. I'm totally being, it's all about me in the moment. But yeah, but for other people who are like, wow, I wish I could do that, but I live here, I don't live there. How much of this is virtual and how much of it is in person, and particularly for folks in your state?
So we do a combination. It's virtual and in person. Most trainings have been virtual, and we're going to kind of keep it that way because we've really built an online community. And not even just folks like outside of the state, but even within the state. I got a call from someone the other day that was just like, I was just answering the call at one of the centers,
Mhm.
and they're like, I want to let you know how much I appreciate Kiva for like everything you do. And he said like I am homebound, like I can't leave. I'm a disabled person, and all of my services have forgotten about me and they've reopened in person, and y'all have just continued to offer more. And for me,
Mm.
that I was like, that's the root of it. Like if anything, going hybrid isn't just about meeting those service numbers. It shouldn't be about those service numbers. That's
Right.
exactly what the medical industrial complex's ideas are selling, right? It's about people like him, people like us, disabled
Yeah.
folk more largely. Like, how the hell did everyone just forget about us?
Amazing, right? And COVID, it's like, oh, wow, I can't do that. And suddenly the world opens up, and I keep telling people, welcome to my world. This is not new. Welcome to my world.
Mhm.
This idea of, remote working or rescheduling how your day is, thinking about the importance of connecting to other human beings. Like all of this was, as soon as they started talking about social distancing, I was saying, no, we're going to have to reframe that. It's not about distancing from
Legit.
people socially. It is about, yes, we cannot be physically close to people, and we can be very socially close to people in lots of different
Mhm.
ways. So let's get creative about it in safe ways, because isolation, no bueno for the most part. There are times when isolation is exactly what I need. It is so healthy for me, but all the time, no, not all the time.
It's the same reason why we shouldn't have disabled folk go through the back door. That's the idea. It's like oh, it's all right as long as the non-disabled people are okay. We
Yeah.
can forget about them. I mean, I'm thinking about the Center of Disease Control's director, like midst of the pandemic. Like, as long as you're not chronically ill or just
Yeah. Yeah.
or experiencing things in this way, you should be fine. You're fine. You can
Yeah, the rest of you, oh well, too bad. See you later. Ta-ta. TTFN, ta-ta for now. And that was horrible. When I read that, I was like, do you understand what just came out of your lips? That is so inappropriate. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I signed a letter to the CDC, and some of us met with the CDC, like I want to say a few weeks later, and it was messed up. And same thing with CVS
Mm.
and the prescriptions. It just the amount of disabled folk that have died. And like, if you think that our missions in terms of mental health and disability rights are separate, you are very wrong.
Exactly. That is another thing that I think we could work far better on improving, and seeing these as collaborative work, similar work, same work, however, whatever words we want to use, but they are not separate at all. At all. So, and I know when I entered in first, of course, to more mental health activism, if you will, and couldn't understand why the disability community and the mental health community were not working closer together, disability rights community. There are just so many things where I was like, well, wait a minute, but that law covers us as well. Those protections are for us as well. And sometimes, you need power in numbers. We're all fighting for the same thing here. So why can't we do this together? I think that, we're still struggling with some stigma, around who wants to have a mental illness.
Well, I think like disability rights also looks different for the MAD labeled mentally ill and neurodivergent, because what happens is that you're perceived as violent as well as unable. So the context of disability rights changes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Because that's not happening over in other forms of disability. That's not sort of the construct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very
Yeah.
good point. I hadn't thought about that. I think, hearing you helps resonate with me about when we focus on people, but things around us are focused on power, privilege, politics, paternalism.
You
We lose
know,
all the peace.
I contributed a chapter for the new Drop the Disorder book. So I guess shameless plug capitalism. Here we go. But also, like at the same time, this chapter, and the book hasn't been released yet, is like it's the how-to guide to become a mad abolitionist. And the focus of the whole chapter is a lot of it's on collectivism. It does start with the story of Lois Langdon, who's Malcolm X's mother, and her institutionalization in Kalamazoo State Hospital and the circumstances of that, and white social workers, policing, and all that fun stuff. But then it leads into, here are the tangible steps as mad activists, the work that we can do. And a lot of it is that patriarchy is so driven on individual power. Colonization was always driven on the individual power of a collective group, but also kings and monarchs, right, alike. And then that individuality, now it's like, now you as an individual, your information, everything that you contribute is sold. So like, now you're the product, right? Well, we've always been the product in many different contexts, but now digitally you're the product on top of so many things. And I think for me, that feeds into the individuality in that very toxic sense, right? So I realize this a lot too by, I really got into content creation more now than I had before. And I think a lot of people have. And I started making like a series of TikTok videos on Mad History, which if folks want to check it out, it's on TikTok. But I took a step back from that content creation too. And I had to rethink, am I feeding into this larger idea of myself as the product when what I want to do is increase public awareness, right? And how can you do that at a pace that serves you and your collective and your movement and doesn't destroy you, destroy your image, destroy what you think of yourself, and destroy your self-value, you know?
Yeah. I think I'm noticing a lot of content creators having this conversation with themselves on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Like deciding, oh, I need to take a break, or is this really what I want to do? And, so as we wrap up, you dropped a lot of wisdom. It's like everybody does throughout the whole conversation. What one nugget, one thing, if you had to leave one thing for people who are listening in, what one wisdom dropping do you have for them? One nugget for them?
I think the most important thing when we talk about some of these ideas of what is radically needed for our community and ourselves, we'll find it in each other. And I like to think of many things, there's this idea of like follow plants, not gurus. And what is a guru, right? Everything's a guru. This lamp next to me is a guru. My lemon tree behind me is a guru, because you learn lessons in everything, and you learn lessons from each other. And I learn lessons from ancestors who haven't been alive for a very long time, right? And in the context of what we call alive. And I know that that's maybe for some of the listeners, you're just like, okay, wow, that's a mad thought right there. But what I'm trying to say in that is that we have lessons in each other, and we can value and appreciate that. You can set boundaries, and there's so much in community care and accountability efforts and what we do with each other as a collective that I think is so important when we think about dismantling a lot of these ideas, but also building communities of healing independent of those systems, these ideologies, and to not give up on that, right? It takes a discipline of hope. I'm going to quote Miriam Kaba, a discipline of hope to really push through a lot of these things. So you actually have to have hope, whether you don't like that term hope or not, or you don't feel it's liberatory, you don't feel like it aligns, you don't have to take it. But however you think of that concept, it takes that hope in the face of the horrifying to really be able to move through together as a collective.
Wow. Love that. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Okay. I have to like breathe that one in, breathe it in, take it in. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, Vesper.
It was so great to be here, Karis, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect. I know that
I know.
you were like talking about like we're just getting to know each other, but I feel like I've known you for a long time, you know.
Yeah. It's just been wonderful. And to meet you in person and hang out with you in person has been also an absolute joy. So thank you for joining. I want to thank the listeners also for joining in. And just a reminder to, well, y'all know what to do. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. Just, whatever, like, subscribe, share. Most importantly, share. Subscribing and all that other stuff. Yeah, to me, my producer's going to kill me for saying that. But to me, the most important thing is to share this great information that we're hearing from folks with other people. So thanks for joining in. And until next week, we'll check you later on Unapologetically Black Unicorns.